I was waitressing the morning shift at a sports bar when this big, filthy guy sat in my section. Shoulder-length tangled hair, ripped, stained clothes, the whole unhinged drifter look. Still, I've always been good at my job. I don't treat people differently just because they look rough. I walked up to greet him, and the smell hit me instantly. Straight garbage, rotting trash and body odor mixed together. I need to explain something. I grew up neglected and abused. That matters for a few reasons. First, I know what it feels like to be judged, so when I see someone who looks like they've been judged unfairly, I tend to overcompensate with kindness. Second, my parents were extreme hoarders. The smell of trash, especially trash mixed with biological funk, sends me into anxiety spirals. Third, because of the abuse and other trauma, I have severe PTSD. This sports bar was the last job I was able to keep. I'm constantly hyper-aware of my surroundings, always scanning for threats. My brain is wired for defense mode, especially when it comes to my home. Even though this guy's smell was triggering the hell out of me, I treated him well. I assumed he was down on his luck. It happened to be all-you-can-eat taco bar day. He stayed for 5 hours. 5. I figured maybe he hadn't eaten in a while. That hit me personally because my siblings and I used to go days without food. I felt for him, so I went above and beyond. Refills, extra napkins, extra kindness. He left. Nothing weird. The next week he came back and specifically asked for me. This time he brought printed emails between him and his ex. He asked if I could read them and explain what she meant, since I was a girl. I told him I'd look at them when I wasn't busy, fully knowing I never would, and shoved them into my purse. That's when I saw his name in the email header. Steve. He started asking what days and shifts I worked. I lied. Completely fabricated schedule. Then came more personal questions. I've waited tables 8 years. I've dealt with plenty of creeps. I keep a fake life story ready for moments like this. Imaginary giant boyfriend with anger issues, nosy neighbors, protective family, whatever keeps men at a distance. The only real thing I accidentally told him, that my sister worked at Subway. I even slipped and said her name. The second it left my mouth, my stomach dropped. I knew I shouldn't have said it. I ignored the feeling. A week later, during a night shift, Steve came in furious. He demanded to know why I wasn't working the shift I told him I had. I said I'd traded shifts. He got way too close to me and said I better be there next time. Then he left. One of the cooks later told me he'd seen Steve sleeping in his car in our parking lot that morning. Said the same trash-filled car had been parked there multiple nights. After last call one night, Steve said he wanted to order food. I told him the kitchen was closed. He went to the bathroom. I waited for him to leave. He didn't. My panic started building. I told the bartender/manager. He and the bouncer found Steve standing on the toilet in a stall, just standing there. They dragged him out and banned him for life. When my boyfriend picked me up that night, he brought 2 friends. I hid my face, changed my appearance slightly, checked mirrors the whole way home. Steve never came back. I quit shortly after. A few months later, my boyfriend and I broke up. I kept the apartment. My sister moved in. Then things escalated. One weekend, my girlfriend and I went out of town. When we came back, one pane in a multi-pane window had been carefully pried out, not smashed, removed quietly. My sister had been home the whole weekend and heard nothing. It didn't feel like a robbery attempt. We were broke. You could tell by glancing through the windows. I keep blinds shut, with only tiny gaps from the cats. I know exactly what can and can't be seen. I'd even installed long screws so the windows couldn't open more than a few inches. The pane was pried out quietly, meaning whoever did it knew someone was inside, and it happened the only night in over a year that I left town. I didn't post about it, only told a couple close friends. The next night, we heard footsteps in the yard. Neighbors' dogs were barking aggressively. I grabbed my gun and stood in the living room near the yard. I listened carefully. 2 feet, not 4. The second I realized it was a person, I started flipping the lights on and off in a pattern, trying to make it look like we were signaling the neighbors. The footsteps ran off. That confirmed it. This wasn't a random break-in attempt. You don't come back the next day to retry a failed burglary. We bought tasers and wasp spray. It sprays farther than pepper spray, and neither of us had concealed carry permits. My sister refuses to touch guns. A few days later, my girlfriend dropped me off after an argument. She tried to return $20 I'd thrown at her for my half of dinner. I refused to answer the door out of spite. She texted that she'd tucked the money in the screen door. I heard footsteps outside my bedroom window. I assumed it was her. It wasn't. When I went to grab the money, it was gone. It had been 3 minutes. That meant whoever took it was within 50 feet, in our backyard, watching. It also meant he knew which bedroom was mine. A week later, more footsteps. I did the same light routine, but this time flipped the switch every time I heard a step. Once he realized I was timing him, he ran. I ran to the peephole and saw a big man with wild hair sprinting down the alley. The silhouette looked like Steve. I dug through my purse and found the emails. I'd kept them because something about him set off alarms. His full name was there. I searched public records and found his mugshot. When I showed my sister, she turned pale. She'd seen him before. He'd come into her subway job, smelling like garbage, asking her questions, smiling in a way that made her skin crawl. She bikes to work. He probably followed her home. It became painfully clear. This wasn't about my sister or my girlfriend. It was about me. I called the police, gave them everything, even the cook's name who could describe Steve's car. Within a week, they found the car abandoned by a lake, full of trash, personal belongings, and pages, hundreds of pages, detailed writings about me, about my sister, about my girlfriend, a checklist of every subway he visited to find my sister, notes about our house layout, and then the worst part, a sexually explicit plan describing how he would break in, kill my sister, wait for me, then keep me alive while cutting pieces off me and eating them, 1 piece a day, forcing me to watch. I already had PTSD, so did my sister. After this, it got worse. We're both now in the disability process. It took me 6 hours to write this. I avoided telling it for years because it triggers panic attacks, but maybe sharing it might help someone else listen to their gut. Be kind, please. I worked at a large assisted living facility for a few years, and I absolutely loved my job. Most of my time was spent with elderly residents, but over time I became a highly requested assistant and got moved around to different units: dementia, short-term rehab, stroke, basically wherever I was needed. I enjoyed going the extra mile and connecting with patients and their families, which I think made me a better CNA. I often got the more challenging patients because I could handle them without issue. One day, we got some new admits. One patient was already difficult and tried to escape a few times, so he was moved to another unit. I was asked to calm him down, and to my surprise, he immediately took a liking to me. While I was around, he cooperated, took his meds, showered, ate, and settled into bed. But when my shift ended, he would act up again and need one-on-one supervision. Eventually, he became too attached. He insisted I be with him constantly, which I couldn't do because I had responsibilities elsewhere. His behavior escalated. He yelled at staff, was aggressive with other residents, and became a liability. He started calling me his girl, hugging me, and even kissing my cheek, which made me extremely uneasy. Management stepped in, telling me to stay away from his unit and arranging safety measures. I had to be escorted in and out, and my shifts were adjusted so he wouldn't know when I was working. He kept calling the facility, asking for my schedule, and legal threats had to be made to stop him. Eventually, he was discharged, and later ended up in jail for parole violations. A month or so later, I learned he had been killed in prison. His past included severe violence, child abuse, domestic abuse, and other crimes. After that, I left the facility and moved on to bigger things, finally feeling safe and able to sleep peacefully, knowing someone like him could no longer harm anyone. This happened a few years ago during hurricane season. I live in a coastal town in Florida. When storms roll in, they roll in hard. That night, the Weather Channel had been screaming about flash flooding and tornado warnings. But I wasn't too worried. I've ridden out storms before. Around 10 p.m., the power went out. No big deal. I lit a couple candles, grabbed some blankets, and settled in on the couch. The wind was howling, rain slamming against the windows so hard it sounded like someone throwing gravel at the house. Then I heard pounding. At first I thought it was debris hitting the front door, but it came again. 3 loud, deliberate knocks. I froze. Nobody walks around during a hurricane. Nobody. The knocking came again, slower this time. "Hello? Please, I need help." It was a man's voice. I didn't answer. I don't open my door at night, especially not during a storm when no one should logically be out there. Then he said my name. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. He said it clearly, calmly. "Emily, please, I know you're in there. I don't have my name on my mailbox, no welcome mat, no decorations, nothing outside that identifies me." I stayed silent. He knocked again, harder this time. The door shook in its frame. "I just need to use your phone. My car flooded. I can't get through to anyone." The thing is, I hadn't heard a car, not before the storm got bad, not tires screeching, not a door slam, nothing, and my driveway was empty. I slowly crawled toward the side window where I could see part of the porch without being visible. Lightning flashed. For half a second I saw him, tall, soaked, standing way too still. He wasn't shivering. He wasn't trying to shield himself from the rain. He was just standing there, facing the door. Then he knocked again, but this time he dropped the polite tone. "Open the door." Not yelling, not begging, just flat. That's when my phone buzzed in my hand and I almost screamed. It was my neighbor, Mark. He texted, "Do not open your door." My heart was pounding so loud I could barely breathe. Another text came through. "There's a guy walking house to house. He's been looking in windows." My blood ran cold. The man on my porch knocked again, then started trying the doorknob, slowly, like he expected it to open. I hit 911 and whispered what was happening. While I was on the phone, the knocking stopped. Total silence except for the storm. Then I heard footsteps, not running, just walking off the porch. A few minutes later, red and blue lights lit up the rain. Police found him 2 houses down, standing under someone else's awning. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a phone. And here's the part that still messes with me. When officers searched him, they found a folded piece of paper in his pocket. It had 3 addresses written on it. Mine was first. I don't know how he got my name. I don't know why he chose my house. But I know one thing. If I had opened that door because I felt bad for him, I wouldn't be telling this story. This happened when I was 22, living alone for the first time. I just moved into a small apartment complex outside the city. Nothing fancy. Thin walls. Questionable parking lot lighting. The kind of place where you mind your business and hope everyone else does too. There was this guy who lived in the building across from mine. I noticed him the first week. Not because he was attractive, because he stared. Every time I walked from my car to my unit, he'd be outside, smoking, just watching, not smiling, not waving, just watching. At first I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe he just liked fresh air. Then he started timing it. If I came home at 6:12 p.m., he was outside at 6:12 the next day. If I left at 8:03 a.m., he'd open his door at 8:03. Too exact to be coincidence. One night I tested it. I drove past my building, looped around the block, and turned my headlights off before pulling in. His door still opened. He stepped out like he'd been waiting. That's when I knew. A week later, I found a note under my windshield wiper. It said, "You look prettier when you don't rush inside." No name, no threats, just that. I reported it to the leasing office. They shrugged, said unless he actually did something, there wasn't much they could do. Cool. So I started varying my schedule, parking in different spots, having friends walk me in. Then things escalated. I was folding laundry one night when I heard a soft knock at my door. Not loud, not aggressive, just gentle. I checked the peephole. No one there. I waited. Another knock. Still, no one visible. That's when I realized something. If someone stands directly against the wall beside the door, they're invisible through the peephole. I didn't move. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then a text came through. "Why won't you open the door?" My entire body went cold. I hadn't told anyone my number except family and 2 close friends. Another text. "I can hear you moving." I turned every light off instantly and stepped away from the door. He knocked again, this time harder. "I just want to talk." I called a 911. While I was whispering to dispatch, he stopped knocking. Silence, then slow footsteps walking away. Police showed up 10 minutes later, searched the area, didn't find him outside, but they did find something else. Behind my building, near my bedroom window, officers found cigarette butts lined up neatly along the wall, like someone had been standing there for a long time, watching. The next day, I went to management again, this time with a police report number. They checked security cameras. There was no footage of him leaving his apartment that night. None, which meant one of 2 things. Either the cameras were garbage, or he never went back inside. I broke my lease 2 weeks later, moved in with a friend across town. A month after I left, I got another text from an unknown number. "I liked you better at the old place." I changed my number that night. To this day, I still check over my shoulder when I unlock my door. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't someone breaking in. It's someone who never needs to. I just got back from dinner with my mom, and somehow we ended up talking about something that happened almost 20 years ago. While we were laughing about it now, I realized it's actually a perfect story to share here. Before I get into it, I need to paint the picture. At the time, my mom was 43 and I was 18. Our relationship? Not great, and honestly, that was mostly on me. I was deep in my rebellious phase. I was heavily involved in the metal scene. Specifically, I was the vocalist in a black metal band. Yes, the full demonic screeching vocals. Pro tip, it's mostly technique. On top of that, I'd recently developed a fondness for weed. My mom, on the other hand, was pretty normal. Nothing flashy about how she dressed or acted. Although, and this matters, she loved wearing blue and had long blonde hair. Behind our house was another property run by what I think would translate to social services. I'm Belgian, so forgive me if I'm butchering the terminology. It was essentially a sheltered living setup. 3 men lived there, Abe, Bart, and Carl. Abe and Bart clearly needed support, but they were harmless. Carl was different. At first glance, he didn't stand out. Short guy, dressed neatly. But if you've ever met someone who's completely detached from reality, you know, it's in the eyes. Carl was heavily medicated, but still deeply unstable. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I won't pretend to diagnose him, but he suffered from intense religious delusions. He believed certain people were angels, demons, or figures from the Bible. Now let me describe how I looked coming home from shows. Long hair, beard, muscular build, a long black robe like a monk, studded leather belt and wristbands, huge pentagram necklace, full corpse paint. So yeah, after seeing me like that a few times and hearing my mom and I constantly arguing, Carl became convinced I was a literal demon. And here's where it gets interesting. In his mind, my mom, with her blue clothes and long blonde hair, was the Virgin Mary, and I was trying to drag her to hell. He was medicated, so up to that point he wasn't dangerous, until one hot summer day when the police showed up at our house because I'd been involved in a fight. My mom invited the officers to sit in the yard while they talked to me. For Carl, that was the breaking point. The cops eventually left after I convinced them I'd just been nearby. My mom and I started arguing again. At the same time, Carl stopped taking his medication. A week later, I had a show in a neighboring city. Around 3 a.m., I got home. I hadn't drunk or smoked before driving. I wasn't that dumb, but I definitely planned to after. 2 of my bandmates, Andre and Quentin, were with me. I grabbed beers. We sat outside in the garden to smoke because it was hot. Everything was fine, until Andre suddenly said, "What the hell?" He pointed at the hedge at the back of our yard. Through the leaves, we saw Carl. He was wearing a white gown and had what looked like an aluminum halo on his head. He was physically wrestling his way through the hedge. "What do you think you're doing?" I yelled. "Be gone, forces of evil," he screamed, swinging a massive cross, easily as long as my forearm. We froze for a second. Honestly, that hesitation probably convinced him his cross was working. Then he bolted toward our open back door. That was my cue. I ran after him, yelling for him to stop. He stormed into our house, screaming that he was coming to save the Virgin Mary. Then it got surreal. My mom woke up from the noise. She came out in white pajamas, hair down. To Carl, she must have looked heavenly. He dropped to his knees on the stairs and started praying. Meanwhile, the 3 demons behind him, us, were clearly unaffected by his cross. I grabbed him by the neck, fully ready to go medieval on him. We had issues, sure, but that was my mom. He twisted free and swung the cross, hitting Quentin in the head. Andre and I locked eyes. Carl was about to get wrecked. "Stop!" my mom shouted. She stepped forward, took Carl's hand, and calmly said, "I think you're misunderstanding this." He looked up at her and started sobbing, like full-on ugly crying. He said he was trying to protect her from us. "I know," she said gently, "but that's not necessary." I whispered to Andre to call the police and stay downstairs. Then my mom pointed at me. "Look," she said to Carl, "he's just a kid who likes to dress up. I don't like it either, but it's a game." I took off the robe, the belt, the heavy accessories. Underneath, I was standing there in nothing but my boxers. If I had a photo of that moment, I'd frame it. Carl crying on his knees, my mom glowing in white pajamas, Quentin holding his head, me in boxers. You don't even have to be insane to find that confusing. Carl sniffled and said, "But you're the Virgin Mary." She smiled. "No, I'm just a nice lady, and that's my son and his friends. It's all okay." He looked at me, then at her. He stood up slowly, grabbed his cross, stared at it, and said in a small, almost childlike voice, "Didn't I tell you?" Then he walked downstairs, through the garden, back through the hedge, and into his own house. Later, the police showed up. We explained everything. The next day, Carl moved out. 2 days after that, his social worker visited us. He explained Carl's mental spiral leading up to that night and kept repeating how lucky we were to be unharmed. Teenage me, full of ego, said, "I would have handled him." The social worker just shook his head. Apparently, Carl had also been carrying a large knife under that gown. When I was 17, I worked at a small local movie theater in my town. It wasn't one of those huge corporate chains, just a family-owned place with maybe 6 screens, sticky floors, and the smell of popcorn permanently baked into the walls. It was my first real job, and I loved it. Free movies, free popcorn, late-night shifts with coworkers who felt more like friends than colleagues. That's where I met him. He was in his mid-20s. I'll call him Jason. Jason had this quiet, slightly awkward vibe. Not creepy at first, just introverted. He worked projection, so he spent most of his time alone upstairs, threading film reels and pretending the rest of us didn't exist. We started talking during slow shifts. He'd come down and hang by concessions when there were no showings to start. He'd ask about school, about what music I liked, about my plans after graduation. It felt harmless. Looking back, there were signs. He'd always wait for me to finish my shift, even when his ended hours earlier. He'd insist on walking me to my car. He somehow always knew when I was scheduled, even if we weren't working together. But I was 17. I just thought he was being nice. One night, after closing, a few of us decided to grab food at a 24-hour diner down the road. Jason invited himself along. At the diner, he sat next to me instead of across from me. Our knees touched under the table. He didn't move. I did. He kept complimenting me, saying I was different, saying I was mature for my age. That phrase should have been my red flag. A week later, he asked me out. I laughed, because I genuinely thought he was joking. He wasn't. I told him I was 17. He said that didn't matter. I said it did to me. After that, he got weird. He stopped talking during shifts, just stared. If I laughed with another coworker, he'd go silent and disappear upstairs. One evening, I left work around midnight. The parking lot was mostly empty. I got into my car and checked my phone before starting it. That's when someone knocked on my window. Hard. I screamed. It was Jason. He was standing inches from the glass, smiling. "I just wanted to make sure you got to your car safe," he said. My heart was pounding. I hadn't seen him clock out. I didn't even know he was still there. I forced a smile and said thanks. He didn't move. "Are you going straight home?" he asked. "Yeah. I'll follow you, just in case." I told him that wasn't necessary. He said he'd feel better if he did. I drove off anyway. Halfway home, I noticed headlights behind me. They stayed behind me through every turn. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to a gas station near the police station. I parked under the brightest lights I could find. The car behind me slowed down, then kept going. The next day at work, he acted like nothing happened. I told my manager. Turns out I wasn't the first. Another girl who had worked there a year before me had quit suddenly. No explanation. Just gone. Management talked to him. Nothing changed. A month later, he was fired after a customer complained that he'd been watching her teenage daughter in the lobby for almost an hour. After he got fired, he texted me. I never gave him my number. The message just said, "You should have trusted me." I changed my number that night. A year later, I heard through a former coworker that Jason had been arrested for stalking. I don't know the full details. I don't want to. All I know is that sometimes the quiet ones aren't harmless. Sometimes they're just waiting. Up until my junior year of high school, I was basically invisible. I stayed in my lane, embraced my nerd girl status, and kept my head down. But when I was 15, I made varsity cheer. Now, at my school, cheerleaders weren't automatically the most popular girls in the building, but everyone knew who we were. We were on the morning announcements, front and center at pep rallies, constantly involved in school events. For the first time in my life, people actually recognized me in the hallways. That year, I made a ton of friends. And somehow, some of them were the cool kids. The same type of people who had bullied me for years. I genuinely thought this was karma finally paying me back. I even developed a crush on one of them. And here's the wild part. The junior cheer captain offered to help me get with him. Homecoming, where I'm from? It's huge. Like cinematic high school movie huge. So when I started hearing rumors that my crush was planning some big dramatic homecoming proposal, I just knew it had to be for me. The junior captain kept dropping hints, smiling at me, asking leading questions. One day at practice, she casually asked, "What's your favorite candy?" I was absolutely convinced she was gathering intel for him. Fast forward to one night after an exhausting theater rehearsal. I walk into the parking lot. and suddenly a guy I barely knew is standing there with a big smile, holding my favorite candy, asking me to homecoming. My theater friends start clapping. My parents are there filming the whole thing. And behind him, the cool kids, including my crush, including the junior cheer captain, laughing, cheering him on. I felt my stomach drop. Because the guy asking me, he wasn't popular. In fact, he had a reputation, creepy, socially off, the type of guy girls avoided. And the junior captain was standing there grinning like she orchestrated the whole thing, because she did. I didn't want to humiliate him in front of half the school, so I smiled, I nodded, I played along. I told myself I'd let him down privately later. When my parents asked how I felt, I told them the truth. I was uncomfortable. I got weird vibes from him. That did not go over well. My mom accused me of having standards that were too high. My dad, not for the first time, straight up asked if I was secretly a lesbian. I'd never had a boyfriend. I wasn't super into dating, and I'd recently become best friends with the only openly gay girl at our school. Apparently, that was enough evidence. I knew if I flat out rejected this guy, it would turn into World War III at home. So I compromised. I texted him that night and told him I only saw us as friends, but I'd still go to homecoming with him. He responded politely, said he understood. I thought that was that. It wasn't. The next day, one of my cheer friends called him my boyfriend. I corrected her immediately. She looked confused and said, "But he's telling everyone you're together." Over the next few hours, multiple people told me the same thing. So I confronted him. He denied it, blamed rumors, said he'd never said that. I reminded him, again, we were just friends. I had zero romantic interest. He said he understood. Then the junior cheer captain called me. She started sweet, said she and him had planned the proposal together, said he was actually super sweet once you got to know him, said I was wrong to friend zone him. I snapped and told her if he was such a catch, she should date him. That's when the nice act dropped. She told me I basically owed him a chance because he'd gone out on a limb for me, that he liked me so much, that I had to give him a shot. I told her I didn't owe him anything, and I hung up. That's when it escalated. This happened about 6 years ago, and I still double-check my locks because of it. At the time, I was 22 and had just moved into my first apartment alone. It wasn't in a bad area, but it wasn't great either. Cheap rent, thin walls, slightly sketchy neighbors, you know the type. But I loved it. It was mine. About 2 weeks after moving in, I started noticing small things. My bathroom cabinet would be slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it. My bedroom door would be cracked when I always shut it before leaving. I brushed it off. New place, new routines. Then one morning, I woke up and my front door was unlocked. I never forget to lock my door. Ever. I stood there staring at it, trying to convince myself I'd just been tired the night before. That same week, I came home from work, and my kitchen light was on. I don't leave lights on. Now I was officially unsettled. I called my landlord. He checked the locks and said everything looked fine, told me maybe I was just adjusting. So I bought a cheap little motion camera online and hid it on a bookshelf facing my front door. The first 2 nights, nothing. On the third night, around 2:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something. It was faint, like a soft click. I froze in bed. My bedroom door was closed. I heard slow footsteps in my living room. Not loud, not rushed, just deliberate. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but didn't press call yet. I just held it. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then I heard my bedroom doorknob jiggle. Just once. I stopped breathing. After a few seconds, I heard the front door open and close. I stayed in bed for a full 10 minutes before moving. When I finally got up, every light in my apartment was on. The front door was unlocked. Nothing was missing. That's what made it worse. I checked the camera footage with shaking hands. At 2:16 a.m., the front door slowly opened. A man stepped inside. He wasn't wearing a mask. He looked normal. Jeans, hoodie, baseball cap. He closed the door quietly behind him and just stood there for a moment. Then he walked around my apartment. He touched the back of my couch. He opened my fridge. He stood outside my bedroom door for almost a full minute, just standing there. Then he tried the handle. It didn't open because I'd locked it from the inside. After that, he turned on all the lights and left. I took the footage to the police. Turns out he was a maintenance guy, former maintenance guy. He'd been fired a month before I moved in, but he'd never returned his master key. He had been breaking into multiple apartments in the complex for weeks, not stealing, just watching. They found out because of my footage. He was arrested. I moved out 2 weeks later. To this day, I lock my bedroom door every night, and sometimes I still wake up at 2:17 a.m. for no reason at all. Years ago, when I first moved out on my own, I rented the tiniest bachelor apartment imaginable. It was a basement unit in a 2-story walk-up right on the edge of my town's college campus, which basically meant the neighborhood was a strange mix of broke students and surprisingly wealthy families. I definitely leaned toward the broke side. The apartment was microscopic. I had a mattress on the floor pushed up against one wall. If I lay flat on my back, with my feet touching the edge of the mattress, I could stretch my arms out and almost touch the opposite wall with my fingertips. That's how small it was. The kitchenette was immediately to the right when you walked in the door. Straight ahead was my living space, which was basically just mattress space, and in the back corner, there was this tiny bathroom that barely fit a sink and toilet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. One night, around 4 a.m., I woke up to a sound that I still remember perfectly. Growling, not faint, not distant, deep, angry, animalistic growling. Because the place was so small and because I slept basically right next to the front door, it genuinely sounded like whatever was making that noise was inside my apartment. It was pitch black, the kind of dark where you can't see your own hand in front of your face. And all I could hear was this low, furious growling coming from what felt like the middle of my living room. I froze under my blanket. My brain immediately went to injured animal, rabid dog, something feral. The growling would get louder and more aggressive, then fade slightly, then rise again, higher pitched this time, almost like a whale call or a shriek mixed into it. It went on for nearly 30 minutes. 30 minutes. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Then suddenly I heard scratching, right at my front door. The growling stopped. Complete silence. There was no animal in my apartment. There never was. It was my next-door neighbor, and apparently she believed she was possessed. This one happened last year. I live alone now. Different state, different place. I've gotten smarter. Cameras, reinforced locks, motion lights, the whole setup. It was around 8:45 p.m. on a Thursday when someone knocked on my door. 3 quick knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked my phone. No delivery notifications. No, your driver is arriving. Nothing. Then a man's voice called out, cheerful and casual, "Delivery for Jessica." That's not my name. I stayed quiet. He knocked again. "Jessica, I have your food." Still not my name. I walked quietly to my security monitor and pulled up the front camera. The guy was wearing a reflective vest and holding a paper bag, but something was off. No car in the driveway, no headlights on the street, no insulated delivery bag, and he wasn't looking at his phone like drivers usually do. He was looking at my windows, scanning. He knocked again, harder. "Jessica, I can't leave this unless you open the door." That's not how delivery works. I spoke through the camera speaker instead of the door. "You've got the wrong house." He paused. Then he smiled. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, just smiled. "You sure?" Every hair on my arm stood up. "Yes," I said. "You're at the wrong address." He stepped closer to the door. "Are you alone?" I didn't answer. He waited, then tried the doorknob. Slowly, like he was testing it. When it didn't move, he stepped back. And that's when I noticed something else on the camera feed. He wasn't alone. There was another man standing just out of frame near the side of my porch, waiting. That second guy hadn't knocked, hadn't spoken. He was positioned where I wouldn't see him through the peephole if I'd opened the door. My stomach flipped. I hit the panic alarm on my security system. A loud siren blasted through the house. Both men jumped. The fake delivery guy dropped the bag. It was empty, and they ran. Not to a delivery car, to a dark SUV parked without headlights 2 houses down. Opened the door, one distracted the homeowner while the other forced his way inside. They hadn't caught them yet. What gets me is this. If I'd opened the door just a crack, if I'd believed the uniform, if I hadn't had cameras, I don't know what would have happened, but I know they weren't there to drop off food. They were there to see who'd opened the door, and that night, it almost would have been me. This happened when I was 19 and renting a tiny house off campus with 2 roommates. It was cheap, suspiciously cheap. The landlord told us the previous tenant left suddenly, but didn't elaborate. We didn't ask. College kids don't ask questions when the rent is low. The house had this narrow hallway that led to our bedrooms and a small bathroom. At the end of the hallway was a little square panel in the ceiling, one of those attic crawl-space doors with a pull string. None of us ever went up there. About a month after we moved in, we started hearing noises at night. Not loud crashes, just shifting, like weight moving slowly above us. We blamed squirrels. Old houses make noise. Wood expands. Pipes knock. We convinced ourselves it was normal. Then one morning I woke up and my bedroom door was open. I always sleep with it closed. Always. I asked my roommates if they'd come in. Both said no. They thought I was messing with them. A week later, it happened again. Door wide open. No explanation. That same week, we noticed small things moved around the kitchen. A chair slightly pulled out. A cabinet cracked open. A spoon on the counter when none of us had cooked. We accused each other constantly. Until one night, around 2 a.m., I heard something different. A soft thud. Then what sounded like slow crawling, right above my ceiling. I held my breath. It moved across the hallway, then stopped, directly above my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and texted our group chat. "Are either of you in the hallway?" Both replied immediately. "In bed." "Yeah." "Why?" Before I could answer, I heard it, a faint scratching sound, above me, near the vent. I stared at the ceiling vent, and I swear to God I saw it shift slightly, like pressure from above. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day we called the landlord and demanded he check the attic. He showed up annoyed, brought a ladder, rolled his eyes the whole time. He pushed the hallway panel open and immediately froze. There was insulation pushed aside near the opening, like someone had been clearing a path. He climbed up halfway, shined a flashlight around, and then climbed down fast. Too fast. We asked what he saw. He said, "Probably raccoons." But his hands were shaking. After he left, my roommate's boyfriend came over with his own ladder. He went up there. About 10 seconds later, he said, "You guys need to see this." We climbed up one by one. In the far corner of the crawl space was a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, water bottles, and a small battery-powered lantern. Someone had been living up there, watching us. We called the police immediately. Officers searched the attic and found more. There were small holes cut into the drywall, directly above our bedrooms. Tiny peepholes, perfectly positioned to look down through the ceiling vents. The sleeping bag was still warm. Whoever it was had left recently. They never caught him. No fingerprints, No cameras on that side of the house. We moved out within a week. To this day, I still check ceilings in every place I live, because sometimes the call isn't coming from outside the house. Sometimes it's already inside.